The Prudential Insurance Company had a house style, red brick, garish red brick, a bit like McDonald's today I suppose, easily recognisable, designed by Alfred Waterhouse. This must have seemed even more intrusive when it was built in the 1890s than it does today. Complete contrast to the stone. Alfred Waterhouse, who built it, his greatest achievements I think were Manchester Town Hall and the Natural History Museum, two of the most stupendous buildings of the Victorian era. He was sort of Richard Rogers and Norman Foster rolled into one. Huge practice. And here's his work in Bradford. Slightly softened now. Ivegate is Bradford's historic shopping street, the old ancient artery of the town. And as you can see, it's pretty run down, though there is some signs of improvement. What an interesting group of buildings there are, as you can see high up here, on this sort of almost sort of Egyptian sort of building here too, even though it's run down, which is still really full of interest. But let's go further up the street to show you something really quite distinct and remarkable. This is a rather nice bit of Bradford history. It's at this place in a dungeon below the street that John Nelson's, the plaque says, the preaching stonemason from Birstall was imprisoned by, in fact, the vicar of Bradford. Only a few nights, a loathsome, horrible place it was. But now, that site of his former dungeon has become what? A body piercing studio, which seems to me a wholly appropriate use for this bit of building. The top of Ivegate here is a nice place to see some of the worst and one of the best buildings of Bradford. Shall we look at the worst ones first? First of all, the Kirkgate Centre. This is on the site of the wonderful Bradford Kirkgate Market, demolished in the 1960s. Despite the protests of people like J.B. Priestley and David Hockney, council took no notice. Even the architects who put this monstrosity up regretted the demolition of the building. Worst building number 2 is the former Yorkshire Building Society building, as you can see high up above us. That building reminds me of the Ministry of Love, which was a torture and prison. And George Orwell describes it as being patrolled by black uniform guards with rubber-jointed truncheons. Well, the Yorkshire Building Society is Bradford's equivalent to the Ministry of Love in Orwell's 1984. Horrific building. So it's a relief, let's turn with a relief to one of the finest, I think, pleasantest buildings in Bradford, the former cooperative building, now T.J. Hughes. Built by the co-op in the 1930s in a sort of international modern style, a little bit like the Morecambe Middle and Grand Hotel or the Deloitte Pavilion at Bexhill-on-Sea. It seems to me that that building brings to Bradford, if you like, a whiff of the seaside. Isn't it a great picture? That wonderful staircase tower hasn't got sort of cafes and so forth. People have put in their coffee. A wonderful building, not really fully used, but fortunately now listed, very recently listed and now preserved. Bradford's fortunate to have a large number of extremely fine bank buildings. This is the Bradford Bank built in 1858. As you can see, in a wonderful Italian Renaissance style. Just look at the detail of the carving around the doorway here. And above the doorway, there's a Bradford civic motto, Omnia Labor Omnia Vincit, which being translated means work conquers all. What a wonderful motto for a city to have. This is another awful Bradford building in the 1960s, Arndale House, particularly awful since it replaced the wonderful Swan Arcades, the mecca of Bradford shopping, which is far better than, say, the Victoria Quarter in Leeds, now replaced with this faceless block. The word Arndale is of some interest. The developers of the building were Sam Chippendale, who started off life as a Bradford estate agent, and Ardwell Hagenbach, who ran a chain of bakery shops, and they joined their names together, Arn and Dale, to form Arndale. No such place, of course, in England as Arndale. So here we are on this site of the old Great Northern Station, the sort of ramparts above the city, with a wonderful panorama of the centre of Bradford, starting here at the Arndale House we first noticed a short while ago in all its ugliness. Then panning around we can see the Great Midland Hotel, behind which is the rather inadequate Forster Square station. Then panning around, there's a great pile of earth here, as you can see, which will be the site, or all that's left in fact, all that's left of the old Broadway development and the site of the new development in Bradford. And there above the hillside there we can see Bradford Cathedral. From the ramparts here, we can see a view of Little Germany. It's probably never seen it before, even from when it was built, now that the Broadway scheme has been totally demolished. There's this fine range of buildings stretching along Wells Road and the Leeds Road. And of course, this area of Little Germany, it climbs right up the hill, was in fact the mercantile, the business centre of Bradford, where all the export of woolens and cottons used to take place to ports all over the world. It was threatened with demolition even, 15 years ago, but now it's been restored, and happily those derelict warehouses are now being converted to flats and apartments. And particularly as you see in the far side here, towards the left, where the scaffolding is. This is a site of Eastbrook Hall, the great Methodist temple, where Bradfordians used to queue on Sunday nights to listen to the sermon. Almost a lost case, but now, as you see, being restored. Only one intrusion, this 1950s building in front of us, but not too bad. Then as we swing round, we can see the Gothic buildings and all the Italian Renaissance, all very civilised, all very much of a piece, and all now happily preserved. There must be, in Little Germany, probably a higher concentration of listed buildings than any other part of England. And this is a unique area for an English city. So many of the English cities have lost areas like this, Nottingham for example. Bradford happily has managed to retain it. And Little Germany is one of Bradford's great strengths.